You're listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online, and my name, it's Andrew Mackay-Smith. Hope you're well. The interview subject that I've got coming up for your listening pleasure, we talk about legends. There's legends and there's legends. And then there's John Steele. He's one of the founding members and the drummer for the UK act, The Animals. That's right, the original Animals. So they're the guys that wrote Please Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood, and possibly one of the most influential rock and roll tracks of all time, House of the Rising Sun. Now, the reason for the conversation is that John and the Animals are touring Australia later this month, that being November 2019 through to December, and I'll read out all of the dates, actually. I'll just do it quickly. So these dates here are in November. 27th of November, they're playing in Fremantle. The 28th, they're playing in Perth at the Rosemount Hotel. The 29th, they're playing Hillary's Bar. I don't know where that is, actually, so sorry. But I don't actually have Hillary's Bar. Where's that? Who knows? Anyway, the 30th, they're playing in Adelaide. In December, they're taking a few days off between the 30th and the 4th of December, which they're playing in Wollongong. The 6th, they're playing in Sydney. The 7th, they're playing in Baddo Bay, which is near Wollongong. The 8th, they're playing in Canberra. The 10th, at Newcastle or in Newcastle. The 12th, just down the road here in Byron Bay. 13th is Brisbane at Kedron Wavell Services Club. And 14th is at Tweed Heads, or it says here Gold Coast, but it's actually Tweed Heads, at Twin Towns. So I'll probably try to get along to that one there. This is a really, I don't know what to say about this conversation. We go deep. We go real deep, actually. And John's one of the originals, so he talks about people that we've only heard about via legend in the first person, people that he's known, people that he's met, and he provides his opinion and his thoughts on all of that stuff, as well as the tour, of course. So here he is, Mr. John Steele from The Animals.
Is that Andrew?
It is, mate. How are you going?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm very good, mate. Yeah. Just it's been bloody hot here today, I got to tell you. It's been about 38 degrees or so in the old language.
Oh, where is that?
Queensland on the Gold Coast.
Where? Oh, yeah. Oh, wow.
So you'll be flying into it.
That sounds... Yeah. How's the fires? I mean, are you all right?
Yeah, no dramas for us where we are. They're nearby. They're about... last I heard, like there's spot fires that keep breaking out each day, but we've got such a dedicated rural fire brigade here around us, mate. They just put them out. And I mean, I know people are banging on about climate change, which is no doubt real, but so many of these fires are they're started accidentally by bloody cigarette butts. Can you believe it? By cigarette butts in tinder dry conditions.
Exactly. People throwing stuff out of the car window and, yeah, it's a tragedy.
Yeah, it is. But
we got
you're right.
We got the opposite here. We got we're starting to hit the less than was 3 degrees minus 3 degrees centigrade last night.
God, with all due respect to people who lose their homes to fires and the poor animals and the bush, mate, I don't know what's worse. That bloody cold weather. I'm back at uni these days, and I'm at uni with a lot of students from the United States, and a lot of them are from the really cold parts of the United States. And I've been to New York, and I remember how cold it was in November in New York, and I thought, I don't know how else I can put it, but I'm not used to it being from Australia. I thought the weather was joking. Does that make sense? I thought, how can it possibly be this cold and people live in this?
Yeah, I remember my first winter in New York was winter of 64, 65, and I had to go out and buy earmuffs, because it was absolutely, it's like and the wind down those concrete canyons. Yes. It takes your face off,
It does. No, you're not wrong. It's exactly what it is. Yeah, we've got in Brisbane here, close to me, in George Street in Brisbane, it acts as a wind tunnel, and when there's relative wind around, it gets accelerated through that bloody avenue on George Street here in Brisbane, and it feels exactly the same way. It feels like you're walking up a wind tunnel, or there's Arctic conditions in a tropical environment. But mate, what do? We can't really control the weather, can we, or the environment? We just got to rug up or wear singlets and go swimming when it's too hot.
Exactly. Yeah. So is a way.
Yeah, so mate, you are touring Australia again, and we have had a chat before. I wouldn't expect you to remember, but it was a couple of years back. Might have been when you last toured or the tour before the last one. But this time around, you are playing the major cities again, but you are playing a few regional areas as well. So there's 12 dates in all, so it's a very comprehensive tour that you're coming down here to do, and it's coming up too. It's in this month and through December. And thing is, man, is that you've always been popular in Australia. We've always loved the music that you've done. So what do you put that love affair down to?
Oh, it's the songs, I think. Andrew, it's those songs that we, especially the singles. They're kind of they've got depth to them. They've got a kind of hard edge, and people identify with them. It's my life, and we got to get out of this place. Things like that. So they really stand up well over the years, and we attract new audiences all the time. So when we play, we're playing to audiences from teenagers to senior citizens. It's quite common to have a bunch of kids in the audience who know all the songs.
I bet. And you'd see it too, being up there behind the drum kit too, I suppose. So you're used to seeing all of the age groups from 18 to literally 80 in front of you?
Exactly. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, and enjoying themselves because the band is so tight now.
Good band.
This lineup is, it's really, really tight. We really enjoy what we do. We get on with each other really good. So it's good fun touring. I think that comes over when we play,
I think so
and
too.
People kind of respond.
I've seen the videos.
People respond to it,
Yeah, and you're right. I've seen the videos from your last Australian performances, and it looks like you're having a lot of fun on stage. And look, I'm a musician as well.
Oh,
and I've played on stage with people I don't like, and it actually comes across, doesn't it?
Yeah, indeed it does. Yeah, and the audience really pick up on it.
Yeah, and there's that envious catalogue that you've got, from which to mine songs for live performance. So there's so many hits. You're one of the key bands of the British Invasion. You're Rock and Roll Hall of Famers. So how on earth do you pick a set list?
Oh, well, we always play the major hits, the singles. But then we've got all the rest of this catalogue, which is B-sides, album tracks, just stuff that we love. So it's a kind of pick and mix. We don't play this exactly the same set every night because we're not a cabaret band.
Yeah,
we like to shuffle it around so that we're keeping it fresh, and that's what. It's not difficult. We just go, we haven't done that for ages. Come on, let's do Lonely Avenue,
Cool.
or Nighttime is the right time, and we throw into, and sometimes we haven't played them for a long time, and you think, Christ Almighty, what's the countdown for that? Here we go.
Well, that's so good to hear. You're a real band. I remember watching Fleetwood Mac when Lindsay was still in the band a couple of years back, and it was so perfect. I was sort of questioning if what they were doing was miming it a bit, to be honest with you, until they performed Tusk, and he actually stopped the band mid-set, arms waving and everything. He goes, no, we stuffed up the intro and I couldn't get into it from there, so let's start that up again. And I was so grateful that he did that. Because it was a big show. And, yeah, because you've got to do that. You've got to show the fans it's real, it's live, it's raw.
Exactly, yeah. Well, it's always the same with us and every night. There's no pre-recorded stuff in it or anything. It's just a live band in your face,
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. So I was going to ask this question a bit later, but I'm going to ask this now. What keeps you motivated throughout all of these years? Because I can tell talking to you now how enthusiastic you are about the music and the tour that's coming up.
It's just that's all it is. It's just enthusiasm because it's a great band. It's a great repertoire. What's not to like? You just get on. I mean, those 90 minutes or so on stage for me are the only time in my life I'm 100% focused on anything.
I'm hearing you.
Because you're listening to what everybody's doing. You're moving with the kind of, somebody throws a curve and you have to go with it. Mm-hmm. It's little bits of improvisation that you go, wow, that was good. And, it's just what could be better,
I'm with you on that one there, yeah. I often relate to people that I've got 2 kids, I'm fairly busy at uni and all the rest of it, and I'll be working again very soon. But one of the only times I feel like I'm me is when I'm up on stage performing. Like, it's all down to me on the bass because I'm a bassist to deliver the groove.
Yeah.
And I really feel that responsibility up there, and I feel like as though it's a worthy responsibility.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah, hey, there's never been a good band with a bad bass player and a bad drummer.
Agreed, brother. That's so true. Yeah, I think so many people overlook the rhythm section because they don't understand the mechanics of what makes a band. And I understand people,
Exactly. Yeah.
they look at the singer. In your case, they're no doubt, actually, I'll ask this question now. Do you still get asked a lot about Eric, or do journalists understand, okay, that's a relationship from the past?
I get asked about him pretty much all the time when I'm being interviewed or anything. But it is a thing of the past. Eric's been trying to carve his own career for many years now, and he's been living in California for decades.
Decades,
and, So we drifted apart.
Yeah. And that happens. And like I said earlier, sorry, you go, mate. You go.
I was going to say he announced that this was his last year. He's hanging up his dancing shoes. So I don't know how true that is, but I think he's been having one or two physical issues. He had some trouble with his spine. Had to get some, what do you call it, welded together. The pieces of the spine.
Oh yeah.
And I think that kind of was one or two things, and that he's physically finding difficult on the road nowadays. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm guessing it's true that he's retiring because he had a bit of a bad time in Germany and in Holland.
The performances,
this summer.
Yeah. I get you.
He actually cancelled the tour midway.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Pulled out of several dates. So he seems to be having a bit of a bumpy ride at the moment, and I think he's going to be glad to get home and put his feet up.
Yeah. No, I'm hearing you. Yeah, that's the thing that I think people appreciate about you, mate. You've never done that whole retire end of the road tour thing like Motley Crue. We all knew Motley Crue were never going to retire. By the way, we knew that they were going to come back, but it to be honest, it pisses the fans off. You know what I mean? The fans just go like, oh, I wouldn't. To be honest, between you and I and anybody who listens to this, I wouldn't watch Motley Crue at all. I don't like them as a band, to be honest with you. But, I mean, fans get sucked into this stuff, don't they? And they go, end of the road tour, like the Kiss thing and all the rest of it. It's like, you seriously think it's going to be the end of the road? Let me tell you, with some bands, as long as they've got a heartbeat, they're going. They're going to be around.
Yeah. People ask me, how long can you keep this up? And I always say, look, my body's going to tell me when I can't do it anymore. And there's no way I'm going to go on stage unless I can actually deliver. So until that happens, I'm staying where I am, because I'm enjoying it too much,
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. And you and Mick these days, I can't remember if Mick was in the band. Mick Gallagher, that is, was in the band last time we had a chat. But if you guys have reconnected, I take it you guys are mates.
Oh yeah, Mick. He goes way back to Newcastle when we used to play in the same club. He was in a band called The Chosen Few, which eventually morphed into Lindisfarne. Do you know that band?
I don't know, mate. I'll check it out. Yeah, I'll check it out though.
It was called Lindisfarne. It was a very much a kind of local northeast band, Newcastle band, but they made it quite good with some good hit singles. I don't know how far abroad they travelled, but they're well known in England. Anyway, Mick was part of the origins of that band, and then he joined us in the Animals to replace Alan Price when Alan Price quit the band very suddenly, the original keyboard player. And after the Animals, he's been playing with the Blockheads, Ian Dury and the Blockheads for 25 years.
Great band too,
Ian died, but Mickey still keeps the Blockheads going. So he's got two bands that he's working with. And he also recorded with the Clash. He recorded London Calling with the Clash.
There you go.
And toured with them, and recorded and toured with the Eurythmics and Peter Frampton. Recorded with some stuff with Paul McCartney. I make a joke about that. I say he was in the studio with Paul McCartney, but the only result of that was a criminal record. It's called Ebony and Ivory.
I'd agree with you on that point. My God, yeah, not exactly a high point in anybody's career. That one.
I don't think he actually really played on that record, but it makes a good joke anyway.
It does. That's a good one. I like it, mate. That's a good one. Yeah, it's a good one because it's so appropriate. Yeah, it was. It's an interesting time in Paul's career, that one there. So, but there's.
Oh yeah.
But when I think of you guys, and I'll ask you this: the album Arc from 1983. Do you consider that to be part of the Animals' broader musical catalogue? Like, I know it was a when you guys reformed after some time apart. So, do you consider it an essential Animals album?
No, I don't think so.
I thought so. Yeah.
It was a strange kind of thing, that whole business in 1983, and Arc was mainly Eric's, insistence on writing the songs for the for the album. Mm-hmm. He co-wrote them. He had a co-writer. But generally speaking, it wasn't a sort of joint effort. We just learned the songs and played them. And that was it. I don't think I've listened to it since then.
It had its moments, but I understand what you're saying. Yeah, it was so long after. Well, really, I mean, when you go from Love Is, and then I know there was Before We Were So Rudely Interrupted, but that was overlooked, wasn't it? Before We Were So Rudely Interrupted, if I'm not mistaken, and then there was
yeah,
and then there was Arc.
Yeah, but funnily, Arc, yeah. Funnily enough, people still turn up gigs with the Rudely Interrupted album for me to sign.
Really,
and a lot of people say it's one of their favorite Animals albums. I don't get that, but there you go.
Yeah, I suppose it's a bit like depends on when you were born, I suppose, and whether or not your parents listened to the music or not. I think, and sometimes what happens is a lot of younger people back then, say in 1977, if you were 13 or 14 back then, and your parents are listening to the Animals, the first album you guys had, the classic and Animal Tracks, and then you go, well, I want my own version of the Animals, so therefore, Before We Were So Rudely Interrupted, that's my version of the Animals, that sort of thing. There's that possessive nature of people toward music.
Exactly, yeah. Every generation has to have its own soundtrack.
Indeed, yeah. Do you have a favourite episode in the Animals, or is it all great? It
was all pretty great because it was also was such a novelty. 5 working class guys from a provincial city back in those days, suddenly being touring the world and having all this attention and fame and being on television and radio. It was thrilling. It was really a really exciting time. I think I still have one of my favorite moments, though, is the one I always remember, is when we first flew to America. And did I tell you that story? I must have done. How we
go for it.
We flew. It was the first trip to the States in 1964. And when we arrived, the American record company, MGM, had set up a stunt. They had a British sports car manufacturer, Triumph, had introduced a new model called the Triumph Tiger.
Okay. Yeah.
And the PR people sort of went, ding! We've got the Animals, we've got a Triumph Tiger. So when we sort of did the press conference and everything at the airport, and then they put each of us into a car, into an individual Triumph Tiger sports car, open top, with a model dressed in a fishnet stockings and a basque, whiskers and a tiger's tail, and sat us on the back with the driver. and which you can imagine, we drove into Manhattan with a motorcycle escort.
Oh my God!
and then I kept looking back at Eric, saying, "What?" Because to be in America was such a thing for us. We were everything inspired us. But there we were heading towards the Manhattan skyline in this ridiculous convoy with a motorcycle escort, and it was so funny. I'll never forget that.
Yeah, they were called Sunbeam Tigers, I think, in Australia. The Triumph brand was all under British Leyland. Yeah, so I remember the shape of it. Yeah, kind of like a Mazda MX-5. Like that sort of a car. Yeah, I think, wasn't it? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. But no, that's a classic. Yeah, and mate, I'll ask this question now. How much more time have we got? Because I think we're nearing the end. If I'm not mistaken, 20 minutes, or have we got some more time? You've
got more time. I've got nothing now until this evening. It's 11. It's 10 minutes to 2 midday here, so you've got plenty of time.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. Hey, I was watching, and I know I mentioned this last time we had a chat, but I was watching your induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame again just before the call, and it's always one of those moments that gives me a bit of, it gives you tingles up the spine for you guys to be honoured in front of that many people for your musical contribution. And I reckon, by my own estimation, now I won't ask your opinion on this, but this is my opinion. It's one of the few times that the Hall has actually got it right, in the sense that they had the good sense to induct a band who's contributed so much to rock and roll in a timely manner. I mean, they just make, to be honest, as far as I'm concerned, they make so many weird choices and mistakes along the way. And, they've got Madonna in there, ABBA, NWA. They've got artists that don't even play rock and roll in there. And
exactly.
it's so bizarre. Right? I mean, it's like, is it a rock and roll Hall of Fame or is it a music Hall of Fame? What is it? So
exactly,
Yeah. I mean,
I feel that way. There's so much music, which is nothing wrong with the music, but it's just not rock and roll, and,
Indeed.
And you got to think, well, it's a middle of the road pop stuff. It's not what I call rock and roll anyway.
I don't think it's what anybody forward-thinking person would call a rock and roll. Like, a lot of it that goes there. I mean, ABBA, for God's sakes, I know they were huge, but they're not rock, and their contribution to the zeitgeist of the culture of music, if you like, is that bloody Eurovision thing. And outside of that, they were popular in Australia, I think in the UK, and not many other places. And look, being a musician and being a covers musician, I've had to play a couple of their songs, and they're not bad. I can see people respond to it, but it's fairly, I don't know how to say this, but dated. It hasn't moved with the times. Like, how your music is fairly timeless. Like, you can put on your music and people generally respond to it now. But ABBA, I tend to find there's that what's called cultural cringe associated with it.
It's of its time, and it doesn't move. It doesn't travel well out of its time.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's not universal music. Yeah, so bands like Iron Maiden. I mean, Motorhead, for God's sakes. I mean, Motorhead. I mean, they're almost the personification of rock and roll, aren't they?
Indeed.
And Judas Priest. I mean, these are bands that are yet to be inducted or even thought of. I don't even know whether they've been nominated. I could be wrong, but it's such a weird institution, that one there. I almost think that rock and heavy metal fans, and I know there's a heavy metal Hall of Fame, but I think it needs to be more general than that. I think it needs to be the rock and heavy metal Hall of Fame. I think you guys would be one of the first bands inducted into it, given that you are forefathers of rock and roll.
Yeah, I think I've never thought about it before until now, but it seems to me that like ABBA and people of that ilk who aren't really rock and roll, they get inducted because they've been voted by the current inductees, the members. Yeah. And each time that happens, every year it goes by, that kind of dilutes the list, doesn't it? Because the people who are voting for the next lot aren't really rock and rollers anyway, so they tend to vote for something. I
agree. Very smart point. It's a very sharp point you make, man, and it's a real issue, I think, moving forward, as to how do we honour rock and roll bands, because rock music is just not a part of the cultural zeitgeist in the United States at this point in time. Probably in the UK as well, I'd imagine. It's really...
You're pretty right.
Yeah, it's gone underground, hasn't it, rock and roll, which is really weird. It's such a strange time for music when Beyonce, and I don't want to get this wrong, but I think I'm right in saying this, Beyonce gets nominated for a rock Grammy or something. I mean, it's like, really?
Oh.
What the hell is that? It's like... It's no disrespect to the artist to say that they should simply not be nominated in that category, or even thought of in that category. It should be for rock music, for rock fans, and rock fans will tell you what rock music is. You don't need to go too far to find a rock fan. It's the most popular sort of music, rock music, that isn't promoted these days.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm always encouraged when we do concerts and clubs and whatever kind of venue. We always have a bunch of young people in their teens, even teens in their very early 20s, and I'm always encouraged by them having the nous to look beyond the current charts, the current big sellers, and find music that kind of resonates with how they feel. I can remember being that way when I was 14. And I was very drawn to jazz,
yeah, I can hear that with your drumming. Yeah, yeah, can hear it. Very good drumming. Yeah.
Thank you. But yeah, I think it's great that those young people, those kids, those teenagers or whatever, have thought, I'm not going to be, I'm not going to be governed by this kind of popular stuff that's going on. I want to know where the real stuff is, because we were like that. I mean, when we started playing, we'd been inspired by the rock and roll of Chuck Berry and Little Richard and Fats Domino and all those guys, early rockers. But at the same time, we thought, there's other stuff, and we started to delve into finding the Mississippi Delta bluesmen and guys like John Lee Hooker and Muddy Waters, and it was it was funny that we had that sort of mindset in Newcastle in the 50s, and it wasn't until the British scene kind of broke wide open that we realized that there were people all over the country, and like the Stones and Spencer Davis and whatever, all over the country had been thinking exactly the same thing and being inspired by the same people that we had thought we thought we were the only people who knew about this.
Yeah.
And then we discovered that there was bands all over the country doing exactly the same thing.
Did you have a lot to do with the guys in the Beatles back in the day? Was there a lot of interaction between you?
Yeah, because we used to hang out. There was these kind of nightclub drinking clubs that sprang up, and it was. I remember one time, and it was about 65 or something. Frank Mancini, who was our PR promotion man in New York at MGM, he came over to London to visit, and we took him down to one of the clubs that's called the Scotch St. James, and he was looking around and he said, my God, he said, if this was in New York, the kids would be tearing this building down brick by brick to get in here, because it was like the Beatles were over there and the Stones were there and Spencer was going to somebody else and the Kings. It was packed with all these bands who were...
Yeah, I worked with Sorry, you go, mate. You go.
Okay, I was going to say, we did mingle socially and steal ideas from each other. It was it was good. Was a good atmosphere. There wasn't any kind of ego trip and I'm better than you kind of crap. It was everybody was sticking each other.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I worked with a lady a couple of years ago who grew up in Liverpool in that era, and she was talking about how exactly what you just said then. It was like all of these bands that are now household names, you go down to the local pub and they'd be playing in there doing covers, and then they'd do the originals, and then they go on to do the covers, and it'd be set for set, that sort of thing. But it was just normal back then. You had no idea you were listening to these artists that were literally creating the template for modern rock and pop for the next... Well, they still are. You guys still are. You know what I'm saying? Like, the people that write Taylor Swift songs, they're influenced by the Animals. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, people don't understand that.
Yeah.
It's like Taylor doesn't write... I'm sure she has some part in her songs, but she doesn't really write a lot of it. Whereas the people that write her songs for her, the people that they're influenced by, were influenced by the Animals, the Beatles, the Stones... the Kinks, all of these bands that you just mentioned there, so it really was. It was the petri dish of rock and roll music back in those days in Liverpool and Newcastle and those areas.
Yeah, I was blown away. I think it was maybe a couple of years ago now, when Bruce Springsteen was doing a world tour, and just about every show he did, he said, "I want to tell you, my inspiration for what I do is a British band called The Animals, and just about every song I've ever written was based on, we got to get out of this place, it's my life, and don't let me be misunderstood." Listen to any of my songs and you'll find some of that in there, and that drew me, because I admire Bruce Springsteen anyway, and it was such a compliment to hear him say that, and every night on a major tour. It was really good.
Yeah, that's such an important point that you make there. I mean, we got to get out of this place. I can tell you, mate, I've played that 24 times myself. But remember the Angels did a version of it? Do you remember the Australian band The Angels? They did a version of it?
Yes, yeah, they had a big hit with it, didn't they?
Yeah, we do that version. Man, and I can tell you, it goes down beautifully every time we play it. It's a killer song.
Yeah.
You know, and
it is a killer.
And Santa Esmeralda doing that version of your cut that made the I think it was Kill Bill soundtrack, wasn't it? Did you ever watch that film and hear your song in that?
I watched Kill Bill 1 and 2, and I'm just trying to remember which song it was. Was it We Gotta Get Out of This Place?
It was...
I can't remember.
It was Please Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood. It was the Santa Esmeralda had covered it as a disco song in the 70s. And then that version of it came on, and I remember loving... Honestly, I remember... Because being a bassist, of course, I love a lot of disco and funk and this stuff, and it wasn't until later that I realised it was your song. And it was a song that I play for the kids, mate. I've got to tell you, I put this song all the time on for the kids, and they love it too. You know, I mean, this is the influence. This is the enduring influence of John Steele and the Animals that we're talking about here. And I think it's important that you get this feedback, you know.
Yeah, that's great. It's good to hear that. I must have revisit those Kill Bill movies and check that out, because it's slipped my mind. It's been a while since I've seen them. I really enjoyed them as well too.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's that. It's definitely a Quentin Tarantino movie. It might not be Kill Bill, although I'm pretty confident it is. But he has an ear for really good music, as I'm sure you can appreciate.
He does. Yeah, he really thinks about what he wants in the soundtrack on his movies, and very interesting stuff. There was another point I was just going to make there. What was that? Just somebody, a friend of mine, an old school friend of my wife's, who lives in Vancouver, just sent me an email this week saying that I think it's Ford launching one of their new cars, and they're using an animal's sound an animal song for the soundtrack. It's not. I think it's Boom Boom, Boom Boom. They're using.
Yeah,
I must chase that up.
Oh, please do. I mean, if you've got the publishing on that one, mate, don't let them get a bloody way with it, man. A lot of corporations try to get away with stuff.
I give the guy the accountant who looks after our stuff. I'll have to give him a ring and tell him to chase that up. Yeah, I had to do that a few years ago when Ford Fiesta was a model that was introduced into the UK, and they used Roadrunner, our version of Roadrunner, and it ran for months, you know. So, but I called the accountant and he said, "I'll get on it," you know. And he came back and he had hit them for a tidy sum of money, which we wouldn't have got otherwise, you know. They won't pay out unless you chase them up, you know.
They're such bastards, aren't they? I remember Duff McKagan saying about it. This is similar, different but same field. Is that Duff McKagan on Jamie Jaster's podcast was saying that they did something similar with Geffen Records, that Guns N' Roses had to go back and say, you haven't been paying us royalties on these exit. I mean, Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 are some of the highest selling albums of all time, as I'm sure you're aware. And either they hadn't been paying or we hadn't been paying them sufficiently. And anyway, Duff had gotten onto his accountant or someone important in financial matters to get onto Geffen, and they went, meh, we actually owe you this much, but would you settle for this much? Meaning much less than what they owe them. And the band just went, at least we're getting something, so yes. Oh, they're such bastards, though. I mean, I just can't stand that. Like, they're profiting for no particular reason. They could easily pay you guys a tidy sum for the work that you guys have already done, and everybody would be happy.
They should. Of course, they should do, and it just shows you what bastards they are. But when you have to kind of twist their arms to get it out, get the money back.
Especially, you because you're in that elder statesman status at this point in time. Yeah, it's so true with the Animals, because there's like 15 bona fide hits that almost anybody from the age of 9 to 90, if they heard them, would go, yeah, I've heard that song before from you guys, for example. So advertisers and marketers and shopping centres, whatever, like, they want this sort of music to pipe in, right, to keep people doing what they want them to do, because it's familiar music, isn't it? But unless you know about it, imagine how many times your music would be played for commercial reasons in far-flung places like South America that you haven't heard of. You know, in terms of...
Oh, yeah.
It'd be heaps, wouldn't it?
it's frightening to think about that. Yeah, and yeah, you're right. It's when we do a show, we usually do a kind of meet and greet after, signing some merchandise and things like that. And quite often somebody will say, I just came to see this band because I remember House of the Rising Sun, da da da. But the songs just kept coming one after another, and I kept thinking, I remember that. I forgot. I remember the song, but I forgot who did it. But
That's right.
all of those songs are in the head, and you go, yeah, that was us.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think because you're literally, nobody was doing rock music the way you were doing it before you did it. And I don't think people
Yeah.
of course don't realise that in 2019 for the uninitiated. They don't realise that. So when they turn up to watch your performance, yeah, literally every song that you play will be familiar because they've heard it in some way, shape or form. And I think that's part of the attraction to you guys still performing. And do you see that? Do you see that when you're up on stage and you play and people sort of looking at each other going, yeah, we know this song. We don't know the name of it, but we know this song. Do you see that physical reaction happening?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. I mean, there's some gigs where, we played one in Cairo just this weekend gone. It was a big business billionaire kind of guy who was actually a serious music buff, genuine. He was a really nice guy, but he's rich enough to throw a private party in the grounds of his palatial home. Literally,
cool.
Look over his garden wall, and you're looking at the three pyramids of Giza.
Yeah.
It was that close to the pyramids.
There you go.
It's fantastic. And it was like one of those. It was open air because there were temperatures about 30 degrees, and it was lavish. I thought, is this like being in, Columbo, where he goes to these Beverly Hills mansions to find the murderer of.
Yes. I know what you're talking about. I know what you're saying. Remember the French guy took Poirot? Poirot as well, Poirot and Columbo and all
yes,
that.
Yes, same sort of thing. So there was all these well-heeled people, from all over Europe and the Middle East, friends of this guy, and he was very, very. He throws parties all the time. There's about 200 or 300 people there. He had a proper sound stage, a really, really good sound system, a proper sound man, and everything. So from technically, it was great for us, and we hit off. But there was a space between the stage and the front row of all these seats, the gold plated seats, gold painted anyway. But there was rows and rows and rows of seats there. And that's where the audience were. And there's this sort of half a football field in between us.
Jeez,
but really, honestly, within 3 numbers, they were all down to the front of the stage because they were all clicking in, saying, I know this. And they were really, they're really picking up on it, So, but that's an instance of what it is when they begin to recognize what they're listening to.
I bet.
And I always feel that, when, if we haven't got them by the third number, we never will. But fortunately, touch wood, we always do. We always get a standing ovation.
I've got to ask then, given the amount of bangers and hits that are in your set, and I'm talking about in recent years, so let's go back, say, 20 years, has there ever been a performance, and I'm not talking about from a musical perspective, but where you just don't feel the audience has got it? Like you've turned up to a gig and it's like, they don't know who we are or what we're doing here. I mean, I can't imagine it would happen, but I'm probably not going to have another opportunity to ask an artist as significant as yourself to ask the question in terms of the recorded body of work that you've got. So have you ever played in front of people that have been like, who are these guys? What are they doing? That sort of thing?
I don't know if you know the rivalry between the cities of Newcastle and Sunderland. Did you know anything about that?
Nothing at all. Tell me about it. Go for it.
Nothing. Well, it's just one of those things. We're only about, 15 miles apart, It's one of those things like Liverpool and Everton.
Okay.
Or Arsenal and,
the soccer thing, the football thing, yeah.
Yeah. It is primarily a soccer thing. So the big rivalry between the cities. And for the first time since the late 50s, early 60s, I found myself playing at a nightclub in Sunderland. I can't remember how we got booked there, and with this current lineup, this band, and it was just a lot of people standing around the perimeter of this big glitzy room, and it was a disco kind of place. It wasn't our place at all. I don't know what the hell we were doing there. And then we were playing, and you could hear all the when I go forward and do a little bit of chat, to introduce the guys in the band and Mickey and stuff like that. And I went forward and started talking, and there was this hubbub of people talking to each other, around the bar, and not one of them had come forward onto the front of the stage, And I thought, I've never had this happen before. I can't believe it. But they're bloody Sunderland people, so that's.
Oh, are they just being a bit regional? Are they? Are they being like John and the Animals come from this part of the UK? We're not going to support them.
They're from Newcastle. We're not impressed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the Sydney and Melbourne thing here. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, fortunately that was a very rare occurrence. That every other time I can remember, we've always had a good response, and at least a good response, or more than likely a standing ovation, and have to go on and do encores. So we must be doing something right.
Yeah, we'll call them the Sunderland hipsters. There you go. They're too cool for school. They're too cool to clap for the Animals.
Too cool. I like it.
Hey, do you hear your influence in modern music? So what I'm asking, I suppose, if you listen to modern music, do you hear yourself in it? Do you hear any strain of the Animals through it?
I can't say I do, really. I suppose there must be,
It'd have to be there, wouldn't it? But it's just hard to sort of pick it out directly, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. We do get, when we play in Europe, we do a lot in Scandinavia and Holland and Belgium and wherever. We do get quite often support bands who are obviously very influenced. You can see that, but I can't remember noticing particularly listening on the radio or anything like that. But there must be, there must be that influence in there, and I'm pleased there is.
Yeah, what I think it is, it's in the chord choices and the song structure. I think that's what it comes down to. I don't even think they realise it. But, yeah.
I'm a drummer. What do I know about that sort of thing?
Oh, it's beat selection. Hey, I think your drums are very distinctive. I've got to say, yours and Charlie Watts. I mean, to me, you're the sort of drummer. Whenever I hear your drumming, I can go, yeah, that's John. I'm a bassist, so it might be a bit easy for me to do that. But I think a lot of people feel that way.
Oh, excellent! Thank you. I remember Chaz. Chaz, the bass player with the Animals, and. He was managing Jimi Hendrix, and somebody was interviewing him about what it was like in the Animals, and there was a point very near the end where I quit the band, and they struggled on for a few more, a couple of months or something. The band was more or less cracking up, And so I said I've had enough. And a guy called Barry Jenkins, who played in a band called the Nashville Teens, we knew him very well. He stepped into my shoes. And Chaz was doing this interview, and somebody asked him about that. And Chaz said, when Johnny Steele left the band, the swing went right out of it. It just became another rock band.
Yeah.
I thought, bless you, Chaz. That was lovely,
Mm-hmm. Were you ever close to Mitch Mitchell? The Hendrix drummer.
I met him. I didn't meet him, and but I wasn't close to him. I can't say I was, but same sort of thing. Charlie and Mitch. We all had that kind of jazz influence.
Yeah.
From being early teens, I guess, and it always kind of came across in our playing.
Yeah. I suppose it's just that era, isn't it? I mean, that's the era that rock and roll was forged. Really, I get that there's the Delta blues and everything before, and I understand that. And I've often said they are the founding mother and fathers of rock and roll, No doubt about that, Aretha Franklin, etc. But you guys are the guys that really actually made rock and roll sound what it does now, and it still sounds to this day. I mean, there are bands that come out, maybe not recently because rock music is just so... it's almost become a pariah for commercial, radio stations, and not that they have much influence.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying. Like, but there are bands that
Yeah,
come
I
out
do.
like Vampire Weekend and stuff. I don't know whether you've heard of these bands. I think they're a band from Connecticut in the States. But I can hear you guys in them. And they're still
Yeah?
really, really popular bands. Yeah, these are bands that only had their debut in like 2007 or 8. So they're recent bands as
Wow.
far as I'm in my 40s, so they're recent bands as far as I'm concerned. But,
Okay.
But yeah, I can definitely hear it, man. Yeah, and I think things are cyclical. So I even think the production methods that you guys deployed are influential unto themselves. That very even and crisp production that you had that layered Eric's vocal over the there's two things you can really hear with your music. You can hear, and I've spent enough time in the studio to know this. I think you guys, and I could be wrong here, you guys, if not pioneered, one of the most prominent aspects of your music is the fact that your drumming and Eric's vocal are on par with each other sound-wise. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. It does, because I do listen, and I always lock in with what's going on, especially the bass player. I really love to get in tight with the bass player, but I'm always listening to what everybody else is doing. I like to be able to hear what everybody's doing, and there's a spontaneity about the playing that I still have, even where I can, we're not a band who plays rigidly exactly the same thing note for note every night. We're not a cabaret band, so there's a bit of freedom in there, and I love that. I love that when somebody's suddenly inspired to take a little flyer off, and then you go, we go.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And it's great, and everybody responds at the same time. So the band's so tight, we all know, we can all go with anything that somebody throws in the mix. It's good that. The recording, talk about recording. I don't know if you know the story of the recording of the House of the Rising Sun.
Tell me about it. Go for it. Yeah.
Well, you talk about sort of techniques and recording ideas and things like that. When we recorded House of the Rising Sun, it was in the middle of the night, in the middle of our first major tour when we were playing support to Chuck Berry on his first visit to the UK. Mm-hmm. And Rising Sun was going down very well because we just thought, and it was a Chaz's idea. He said we should do something that's complete contrast to what everybody else would be doing, And Rising Sun, we'd been kicking it around and it was working well, so we did it, and the audience response was positive, Mm-hmm. So we zoomed down to the studio where we did our first single. We'd only had the one single at this point. We got to get out of this place.
Yep.
And it's a little basement in Holborn, in London. It's a one track mono studio. I mean, it was really primitive. Mm-hmm. And we got in there in the middle of the night, set up, did a bit of a run through to get a sound balance, and we said, right. So Mickey said, right, go for it. And we played House of the Rising Sun one time, just the one time. Mm. And Mickey came out and he said, I want you to come in and listen to this. And we trooped into the control room, and the guy, the engineer, played it back. And Mickey said, that's a hit record. And it was like that. It was just a one take, And the engineer said, "Oh, Mickey, there's a bit of a problem there." And he said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, it's 4 minutes 30-odd seconds long. You'll never get the BBC to play that because it's set in stone. It's got to be 2.5, maximum 3 minutes, And these are his exact words. I always remember. He said, he stopped for a beat and then he went, "The hell with that. We're in the final age now. We're going to go for it."
Indeed.
And that was how it was made. It was just a live performance, actually. That's simple as that.
That's a live performance, that classic cut that almost every person on earth has listened to. Is that right? Yeah. I didn't know that.
Absolutely right. No, that's exactly how it happened.
Bloody hell. And, tight band then. Jesus. I mean, that's a tight band there you got then, because that's classic. I mean, that's one of the 4 or 5 songs that made rock music, that song.
Yeah, it's it seems to be an important record on all sorts of levels. You know, the number of people who come up and say that was I can remember the first time I heard that song. You know, blah blah blah, and tell me half their life story in there. But it seems to have hit so many people in so many ways. But that was how it was recorded. That was the most simple, basic, primitive recording situation you've ever been in your life, you know.
Isn't that interesting, though? Because I've often felt that, like I've been a part of projects where we layer this and that on top of each other, and you put various plugins into Pro Tools. You know where I'm coming from, and you try to make bass guitars sound like organs and all the bullshit, excuse my language. But it's interesting that just 4 or 5 blokes in your case plug in and you just go. And that's it. That's but the magic is in between the relationship between the musicians and how accomplished you are as musicians. You know, that's it. That's really all you needed. That's a formula.
Bing, that's it. It's in the can. Thank you. And then we headed off to Southampton for the next gig on the tour.
God. There you go. And you know, the thing is, John, people would say, "Oh, it's a different era." I think, well, it's still music. You know, the point is, it's still music. And I say this to young musicians all the time, the few that I do meet. It's like, forget about piecing together things like a jigsaw puzzle in Pro Tools or Avid or whatever application they use to interface they use to record their music to. Make sure you can play everything from start to finish. That's what being a musician is all about. You know, really honing your craft, listening to the greats like you guys and going, and like, doesn't matter what genre you're playing either. I mean, the majority of the people I interview are from heavy metal, death metal, whatever, but you have to appreciate where the music comes from, which is you guys, you know, the master builders, as I call you guys, you know, and if you haven't got an appreciation for that, it's like learning basic arithmetic before you hit algebra. Does that make sense? It's like these kids are learning algebra before they understood arithmetic.
Yeah, it did. That's indeed right. I mean, to me, when you know, like I say, our early influences, like Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Fats Domino. When you listen to those hits that they had in the 50s, I mean, they just jump out of the speaker. They're still so, for me anyway, I still say, wow, listen to that, you know. I just still love those early recordings, Eddie Cochran, you know. And they were pretty primitive recordings as well, you know, but by God, they don't have to come out of the speaker and, you know, full tilt.
It must be an age thing, John, because the older I get, the older the music I really get into is. You know what I'm saying? Like, I tend to... I love classical music, I love jazz music, but I'm really getting into a lot of soul, like Diana Ross and the Supremes, and I'm listening to it, and it's just affecting me, man. It's just... I'm listening to Diana sing, and I don't know who the bass player was she used back then, but being a bass player, I can just hear... Whether it was probably James Jamison, of course it probably was, but who knows who it was. But they're just, the drummer and James are just locking, if it's James, are just locking things down. And it just tugs on my soul. I can't describe it any other way. Yeah. It just hits you, especially after you've had a few drinks. It's weird.
I've got to confess that the only sort of current music that I hear, I hear on the radio. I'm really not. I'm not kind of trying to keep up anymore. I just can't. There's so much stuff out there in different kind of streams and strata, and I just can't be. You know, I just can't keep up with it. So I basically just fall back on what I've always loved anyway. You know, and I'm just listening to blues and jazz and rock and roll and whatever, and I don't. I don't pretend to be in touch with everything that's going on, you know, and I still get a tingle when I'm listening to Ray Charles or, you know, people that have been part of my life all my life, you know.
It's interesting though. See, I'm a fan of those bands, but those musicians that you mentioned, in a lot of ways, they're your peers, they're your friends. They're people that you toured with and worked with, so you have an entirely different relationship with them. So does that affect your listening experience? Like, when a song comes on by, say, Ray Charles or what have you, or an artist that you toured with that became very popular, do you sort of reflect on that moment when you're listening to that song? You know what I mean?
If that happens, yeah. But you know, Ray Charles and Chuck Berry. Well, I toured with Chuck Berry in '64. Yeah. And Carl Perkins was on the tour as well. He wrote Blue Suede Shoes it's a big track. That you know, Chuck Berry Berry was one of our heroes because he was older than us, you know, and we were listening to his stuff when we were, 15, 16-year-old, and suddenly, when we reached kind of 20, we're on the road with him, So to us, it was like traveling with somebody who was kind of on a pedestal for us. But we were very, very fortunate with that tour to see Chuck still at his absolute, peak. He was still absolutely on top of it, and he had a good backing band, and he actually rehearsed with a backing band. It was King Size Taylor and the Dominoes, a bunch of guys mostly from Liverpool and Hamburg. They worked in Hamburg a lot. And so they were backing Chuck on this tour for 3 weeks, and they had it nailed, And that was exceptional. I didn't know it at the time, but that was very, very rare. Because Chuck, since then, I've realized he never rehearsed with anybody. He would turn up with his guitar.
Yeah.
He would agree to a tour or a contract, and he would turn up with his guitar, and he'd have a local scratch band who he expected them to know his stuff, and he'd go on stage and just go tap it in with his foot, and he'd take off without even telling them what number it was,
Oh God!
And
Yeah.
it could be slow. It could be so embarrassing sometimes because you get these guys who weren't necessarily steeped in Chuck Berry's music, trying to keep up with this guy, and he didn't give a shit. The only thing Chuck worried about in later years was getting his money in his hand before he went on stage.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories out there about Chuck. Yeah.
It was a tragedy because the man was such those songs, just the lyrics of his songs are just absolutely fabulous, But yeah, he got really sloppy and lazy, and I think we had the last of the best of Chuck Berry when we played that tour with him.
Yeah. There's that famous a TV show. I don't know whether you've seen this, but it's a train wreck with Yoko Ono, John Lennon, and Chuck Berry. I don't know. I think they might have been playing one of Chuck's songs. And was it Memphis, Tennessee? One of those songs there. But Yoko's not a musician. Let's face it. Everything else aside,
exactly.
She ain't a musician. She's on stage doing that. I don't know what else I can call it, but yelling. That yelling she does.
Oh.
Thing, howling yelling, and you can see Chuck just going. It was one of those rare moments where I think in that period of time, because it was in the 70s when, to your point, things weren't. He wasn't quite on the same page sometimes as probably where he needed to be.
Right.
But in that moment, I think he went, "Oh shit!" Like you could see his eyes go really wide and like look around, going, "What the hell have I got myself into here?"
Oh, I never saw that. I must check that out.
Check it out on YouTube.
I can find that.
It's hilarious because it really.
I will.
It really should have just been him and John, and Yoko's in the background doing, as I say, I don't know what you'd call it, yelling, yowling, yodeling, whatever, but she's doing it, and he's like, and she just cuts in at like this random time. Like it's not even in the right spot.
Caterwauling, I think is a good. Caterwauling is a good word.
Oh my God!
Caterwauling.
But check it out. You can see his eyes go. He just sort of stops what he's doing and goes. I don't know whether he looks around or what, but I know his eyes go bright. And he's like, you can read his mind thinking, what the hell is she doing?
Oh yeah, I must look at that.
So
I don't know how I've missed that.
Oh, there's a few out there like that. God, poor old Chuck. But that one was very. I remember hearing about that on Joe Rogan's show. You've probably heard of Joe Rogan, that great podcaster. He was on his show about 3 or 4 years ago, and I checked it out. I was driving and I listened to it. And I thought I'd check it out when I got home. And my wife isn't a music. She likes R&B. She was just watching Janet Jackson on the bloody weekend, for God's sake. So, and 50 Cent and all this stuff. So she doesn't understand what you and I are talking about. But I remember telling her, showing her how funny it was. She goes, "What? It just looks like a woman yelling." And I was like, "It is a woman yelling, but it's Chuck Berry, for God's sakes, and it's John Lennon." I think she said, because my wife's half Filipino, so she's half Asian or what have you. But remember, she said, "It just looks like an Asian chick yelling," and I said, "Yeah, it's Yoko Ono, the Japanese singer, or Japanese wife of John Lennon, or I don't even know whether they're married or what have you." And
certainly not a musician, that's for sure.
Yeah. We had our own laugh about it, and I thought, it's interesting, the cultural zeitgeist, as I like to call it. Things like this are really important to me. For someone like her, she's like, just looks like some random chick on stage yelling. I said, well, yeah, it is in one respect. But
Yeah.
but mate, look,
Yeah.
it's
I
been
must check that.
check it out. But look,
Hello?
yeah, look, it's been lovely to chat to you. I better let you go. It's been an hour that we've been chatting for. It's certainly a privilege and an
Has
honour
it?
to chat to you.
Oh, my God. Well, I've really enjoyed the chat anyway, Andrew, so it's been good talking to you, and I hope... where we're playing in Brisbane?
You're playing at Twin Towns,
Um,
I think. Hang on a sec. I had the thing up. I'll just bring it up quickly again. Yeah, you're playing at. Oh no, that doesn't have all of it on it. Hang on a sec. I thought you were playing at Twin Towns. Yeah, you are. You are playing
Twin
at Twin
Towns, yeah.
Towns. Yeah, you're playing
Yeah,
at.
on the 14th.
Yeah, that's near. I've played. You'll actually be playing on the same stage I've played on. So there you go. Once or twice I've
Yeah,
done that
I
down
remember
there.
the place. I've been there. I've been there before. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a
Big,
great
massive.
venue.
Yeah, it was originally an RSL club, wasn't it?
Spot on. Yeah, you know the Australian lingo. Yeah, it was, and it's nowadays probably the biggest club within probably. Geez, it might be the biggest club almost in the area. And when I say area, the two states combined.
Yeah,
You know, it gets
yeah.
thousands of people through there a day, tens of thousands potentially through there a day. And remember the sound guy always said to me, he said, "You turn your bloody bass amp up, I'll turn you off." I remember that. And I said, "I won't turn my bass amp up." You know, I'm not a rock star, believe me. I'm just in the backing band. I'm just here to sort of entertain the masses before the real deal turn up. You know, the John Steels and the Animals turn up. So I'm not gonna, outstay my welcome. Put it that way. But no, it's a great venue, that one there. And I think I've played Kedra and Wavell before too. That's in Brisbane, where you guys are playing. That's an RSL club. I think that should be a good one as well.
Yeah, we're playing on the night before, the 13th. Well, if you can manage to turn up at either of those or whatever, Andrew, it would be nice to see you, and we can have a drink as well as a chat.
I'd like that, mate. Yeah, I'll try and
But
get
if
to the Twin Towns gig actually.
Okay, that would be great. But anyway, if not, it's been good talking to you again, and I hope we meet up. And I'm looking forward to the tour, and I'm looking forward to the weather too. Really am.
Oh, enjoy it. Yeah.
It's good.
Enjoy it. Yeah, look, get to the beach, mate, if you can. It's like, I mean, it's the bushfire. I mean, look, don't worry about all of the the catastrophizers. We get bushfires every year, okay, and we just manage it. It's just been a bit bad this year because we haven't had rain in bloody 8 months or something like that, So it's not as bad as, believe me, you know what the media is like. They sort of catastrophize it, and then there's the Greta Thunberg thing, and all the climate change stuff, and it's not. I mean. I'm not saying that people losing their property isn't a bad thing to fires, but I'm just saying we're all still going about our daily lives, is what I'm saying. So most of us, 99% of us are. So, mate, good to see you down here, and if we can catch up, mate, it'd be lovely to have that beer with you.
That'd be great. Thanks a lot for the chat, Andrew. It's been really enjoyable.
Love it, mate. No worries at all. Thanks very much again.
Thanks. Bye-bye now.
Catch ya. You've been listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online, and my name, it's Andrew Mackay-Smith. Hope you really enjoyed that conversation with John Steele from The Animals. Thanks so much for listening.